what I want to do today is, since this is a production masterclass, I wanted to see on what kind of scale you guys are, on what kind of level you guys are with your production. If you want to know anything about like making music, finding your ways in harmonics, finding your ways in melodies, because I'm sure you guys been here for 1 or 2 days already, and I'm sure you guys have heard a lot of other stuff as well from other producers during the Dancefair. But first, I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more. My real name is Aditya. Right now, I'm 30 years old. I started producing in 2011. I got my first track signed in 2012. And then I did my first world tour with Hardwell in 2014. So to be fairly honest, it's not always about what you can do as a musician, but it's also the way that you can connect yourself as a producer with people in the industry. I think it's more important about the people who you know instead of what you know about making music or how great your production skills are in the end. Well, that's basically a short introduction of me. Like Eva already told, I released a track last summer with Hardwell. It's called Still the One. To tell you a little bit more about this project, it was a project that I already created in 2015. It took us almost a year to find the right vocal. The initial vocalist would have been Matthew Coma. Unfortunately, because of publishing deals and whatever, he couldn't sing on the record, so we got Max Collins to sing on it. And it eventually got released in 2017, which basically means that it almost took 2 years for us to release a record. It's not like a problem if you have a track ready and you can't get it signed yet because it's not perfect. Sometimes it takes a couple of years to make a great track, and sometimes it takes you a couple of months or maybe a couple of days to create one, and then it gets signed immediately. I'm trying to open up this project for you guys. So in the meantime, I want to ask you guys a question. Who here is producing music right now? And who here has been playing instruments? Okay. For how long have you been playing an instrument? Yeah, you.
I've been playing since I was like 6 years old.
6 years old. And what kind of instruments?
It's drums.
Drums?
A little bit of piano as well.
Okay, so that means, and you're right now, how old are you? 24. DJing for 10 years. And I think your dream is to become a producer, singer-songwriter, or a DJ?
I do right here. We got a studio in Denmark.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, we're from Sweden, Denmark. So yeah.
Oh, okay. So you got a little bit of an advantage with the Swedish producers. So who else is here playing instruments? How long have you been playing?
I've been playing the piano for 5 years.
For 5 years? And you've been doing well? Okay. Well, for me, I've been a piano player since I was 8 years old. So that means I've been playing an instrument for 22 years now. I also did like marching bands. I attended school bands. I did every nerdy kind of stuff that you can think of when I was a kid. Recorded flute, trumpet, percussion, drumming, guitar, piano. And I've even attended the conservatorium in Tilburg in the Netherlands for 1 year. And then I dropped out because I wanted to create music instead of learn how to play my instrument. There's no good or bad thing. If you know how to play an instrument, you're clearly in an advantage. But it doesn't mean that you're immediately the more creative person. Because I know a couple of producers who don't play any instruments at all, but they have this creative bubble in their head. And for some reason, they know how to get that on paper. And on paper, I mean, like on this production system. I'm using Logic since I'm on an Apple. I used to work on Cubase when I was on Windows, but after a year I bought a Mac and then I switched over immediately. What the most important thing about producing is that if you have an idea in your head, the thing is that you need to get that on paper. You need to get the melodies and the chords just the way that you wanted to have them on paper. And I think, in my opinion, that's the most difficult part, because you have 100 ideas. At least I have 100 ideas if I listen to a track or if I get a vocal. And then from that point on, I start figuring out what I want to do with it. And the first thing that I try to do is find the right key. Because what is the most important thing about music when you're working with a vocal is to know if it's in a C minor or a G or whatever it is, and to match a certain chord progression that matches with the vocal, which catches the vocal's pure intention, let's say so. So for this idea, basically, what I got in was this.
Paradise, show me a real place where all of our dreams call home.
The first thing that I always try to do when I'm like producing music is to find chords. In this case, I found these chords.
Paradise, show me a real place where all of our dreams call home. Where our forever and always is the only kind we know.
And as you can immediately hear, the chords matches the vocal. So even though there's not like a lot of production around it already, you can hear the track and you can hear the feeling that the vocal comes out with when you're like only just playing the piano. I have a philosophy that when you're at the campfire and somebody's holding a guitar, and you can play the chord progression, you can play the song on a guitar or just a piano, whatever. I think, in my opinion, that's a good song, because you don't need to hear the production, but you immediately know, okay, wow, that's that song. If you can hear In the Name of Love of Martin Garrix in an acoustic version, you'll immediately know that's that song, and everybody will sing along with it. The second thing that I always try to figure out is how to create a melody. Who is here struggling with creating a melody? What do you think is the hardest part about a melody?
Creating the right vibe.
Creating the right vibe. And what do you mean with the vibe? Is it like a feeling that it doesn't match up with the thing that you had in your mind? Okay. You miss. Enjoy.
Just make it in harmony with the rest of the...
Just making it in harmony. Do you know anything about harmonics? When I start like making a harmonic, let's say I'm playing in C. Let's see. When I'm playing in C, the only thing that I usually do is like, or in D. I try to figure out for myself what kind of notes I think that suit like the track, but I always try to keep them in the same, let's say, key. So if you're playing in a D minor, you should only use the D minor scale, or if you're playing in C major, the thing that you can do is, instead of like playing it all in C, you can make it a little bit more tensionous by going to A minor, which is the parallel of it. And it immediately gives you like another feeling. So try to figure out if you're not sure in which harmonic it is. Try to play songs. If it's in C minor, you can start your melody on let's say the third, and the third in this case is an E flat. And from that point on, you can play melodies like. And the third is a thing. I don't know why the third or the fifth, but usually musicians try to do that because you can tell a story. The most important thing in a melody is that you tell a story. So you have a question and you have an answer. In this track, for me it was kind of easy since Matthew Coma was singing the melody line already.
Jupiter gave sirens, 'cause when all the sirens come, you're still the one.
So as you can hear, he sings, because when all the silence comes, you're still the one. So the first part is like your question, and then the second part becomes the answer. That same thing goes when you go into the melody. Let me see where the melody is. So as you can see here, I doubled these for no reason. So this part here, that's your question. And you're gonna answer it with that's a basic little thing, because it's a common sense that your brain wants to hear like this playful thing between your melody line. So if you're trying to figure out like how to make your harmonics like good, or if you're trying to figure out how to keep it, let's say, keep your melody in life. You should try to figure out if you can if you can find a melody line that suits you and which is a little bit playful. So I have this new project which I've been working on. So for like the producers here, you can see that everybody else is always like trying to figure out something that suits the track the best. But it's not always perfect. Sometimes it takes you 10 times or 10, 20 tries before you get the perfect melody line. I got this demo in the beginning, and this is basically how the demo sounds. But as you can hear, there's no like melody line. It's just like a progression. It's just a build-up, and that's it. It was a really basic like progression with the chords and the bass line, but I wanted to have a little bit more fun with the track. So the first thing that I did, again, was figure out which chord progressions I could take. I switched to another key, and this is the first thing that came out.
Lost here like a child, only searching for your soul.
But then I had to find a melody. There was no melody in the track itself, and the thing that I came up with was this one. And as you can hear, there's like an answer, there's like a question and there's an answer. The dun dun dum, da da dum dum. That means that then the track comes to life because you're not hearing that repetitive sound over and over and over again. And then in the end, the only thing that I do is try to layer a couple of sounds, make a build-up really quick, and the first thing that I came up was So as you can hear, it's really playful, and it's not like you're repeating the same thing over and over again. Because in the end, if you're doing that, after like 4 times you're listening to your own track and you're thinking like, nah, that's not it. If you can't listen to your own track like over 100 times, then I'm gonna tell you that it's not really the thing that you had in your mind. Because your mind is not lying to you about the thing that you want to hear. So the first thing that is produced you really need to get on paper with is chord progressions and then your melody line. Because your melody line is your song. If I'm gonna tell you guys sing a song of let's say Galantis or whatever, No Money, everybody hears the melody in their head because it's so strong and the chord progressions are that strong as well. So after like I'm done with the whole chord progression, then comes the sound design. When we talk about layering, there's a lot of things that you can do, and there's a lot of things you shouldn't do. If the sound is not right, you can add as many layers as you want, but you'll never get the sound that you intentionally wanted to get. You can stack up like 5 or 6 layers, but it doesn't mean that you will get the end result. I once heard, I think one of the guys of Swedish House Mafia say, if it's not the sound that's right from the beginning, that it's probably not the sound that you want to use for your track, or else you're just going to stack and stack and stack up more layers until you have, let's say, 80 layers, and for that 80 layers that you have, it's not a good track, because then you try to mix it, and then everything that you try to achieve will not be achieved because there's too much of everything. There's a rule that less is more, and it's more important to pinpoint your sounds that you really want instead of like overstacking or overcompressing your sound. Because as you can see, which is basically my track, let's say it's 10 layers. That's it. And the thing that you want to do with creating a track, you want to get a balance between your basses. You want to get a balance in your mid range and in your high frequencies. But you don't want to boost your high frequencies too much, because if you want to get your track out there on the radio and there's too much high or whatever it is, you'll basically your ears will bleed because it's too much of everything. Some people like it. I personally don't like it. I want to have dynamic in my track so that the track really comes to life instead of like an overcompressed track, which is fun in the club because if you're going out on a festival or whatever and you hit a big EDM kick, for sure you're going to enjoy it. But if you want to make music for a bigger genre or broader audience, you should think about the track, keeping it in balance. And as you can see from all the plugins that I use, it's not a lot. It's like basic Logic things, simple EQing. I don't boost a lot. It's like 3 dB, that's it. And I usually dip other stuff so that I leave more space for the other parts so that you get a full range of the spectrum. No, that's basically how I work. And then from that point on, the only thing that you have to do is find the right kick in your track. There is no perfect kick. I have a couple of them which I'm fond of to use, but that's different because nothing is perfect. And then just add up all sorts of, let's say, beats. And then add it up with everything else that I created, the other 10 layers. That's how you get like a full track without like overproducing yourself or like trying to do all sorts of crazy tricks, which can be really fun if in the end it works. But I've seen projects with too much of everything, and too much of everything is not good at all. So are there any questions in the room?
Yep. I just wanted to know what type of plugins do you prefer the most to use? Like, for example, Serum and
Ooh.
these type of things. Like, what do you rather want to prefer? Bass, Snaz, Chords, or
No, I have a favorite plugin which I use to start off with. It's a piano. Let me see if I can load this one up.
so when it comes to melodies, do you prefer to use the piano?
Yeah, I always prefer to use the piano. Like I told you in the beginning, like I want to make a track or create a song, which in the beginning, if you can play it on the piano and it sticks with the melody and it sticks with the harmonics, that's the thing that I'm looking for. So that if I play it acoustically, basically I have this philosophy of, if you want to do an acoustic version of your live set, it should be possible. That's how I create my music, and that's how I want to create my music. This is the favorite plugin that I use.
And another one, when it comes to
Could you maybe say it in the microphone?
Hello.
Hi.
All right. So, hey. So when it comes to building your melody, do you take the melody for like 4 or 8 bars? Like,
Really depends on the track. Like the first one is like a 4-bar progression, and then in the second 4, I want to change the let's say the 2, 3, and 4. I want to change that so you have 4 different parts in your melody, so that you have 4, like basically you have 4 questions and 3 different answers, so that you get enthusiastic and you want to repeat it overly and overly, instead of like if you come home and somebody asks you like the same questions over and over and you always give the same answer, then basically your whole conversation is gone. And it's the same thing that works for music for me. If the conversation is gone like really quick after the first 4 bars, then there is no reason for me to listen to the next part of the track. But this is my favorite plugin. It's the New York piano. I like it because it really feels like a piano for me. Even with the sustain pedal, it feels real, and that's where I always wanted to start off with. And then, like in this track,
it grants that acoustic vibe, right?
Yeah, definitely.
We ain't got all day. Don't let it go to waste. 'Cause when we going our ways. But right now I'm right here with you. Won't let the moment go by. So keep your body on mine. Let's don't worry about time. 'Cause right now I'm right here, baby.
So as you can hear, I'm always searching for emotions in tracks. It can be a happy emotion, it can be a sad emotion, it can be an energetic emotion, especially when you're like creating a big room track. You want to search for like energy. Let me see if I have something for that as well.
But like you said before, you know, there's more and the less, right? So when it comes to like that I would say that's like more of the build-up, right? Or,
Sorry?
I say like you said before is there's more and less in the less, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to like the drop and you're in the groove, right? Do you prefer to like make it more 4-bar to have that?
You mean like the drop itself in 4 bars, or?
Yeah, in a way, and then also you know when were you in it for it? Yeah.
It really depends on the track that you're creating on and the tempo. Like this is a track which is in 100 BPM, and as you can see, it's 8 bars, and that's it. Because if I stretch this even longer for the first drop, you'll get bored by the second part of the drop. If I would duplicate this part, like I did in the end, the first time you will get bored because you wanna keep a track alive. You wanna keep it in motion instead of like repeating yourself. If your track is like 2 minutes 30 or 3 minutes, that's long enough because most people on Spotify or whatever they're listening to will skip that part already if it takes too long. I'm not gonna listen to a track which is 6 minutes unless it's like a techno track and I'm really into it before a party or an after party. But that's a whole nother league. But like for this track, it's only 8 bars. And as you can hear, there's also a question and there's an answer in the track as well. Any other questions? You can throw it. It's soft.
You good?
I hope.
Okay. Apart from the production and all of that, why do you decide to move, like your career, like your artist career, to this kind of music? For example, what made you like move? Are you still doing like EDM songs, like for festival or stuff like that? What made you move? What was the real reason?
The real reason for me to move over, I'm not sure if you were here from the beginning. Like I'd already told, I'm a musician since I was a little kid. I played live bands. I had a live band for 5 or 6 years, and I wanted to make music, more pop or rock music. But then the band didn't want to do that. They didn't want to create songs for themselves, but they wanted to cover songs. And we played songs from Toto, from Earth, Wind and Fire, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, Maroon 5, you name it, and we played it. So as a musician, for me, like, I transitioned into EDM music since I'm a friend of Hardwell's, and we sat a lot of times in the studio together, and at some point, you're trying to figure out if you can make music for yourself. So from that point on, I started to make dance music, because dance music for me was the easiest way to learn how to make music. And then for some reason, my first bootlegs got on the national radio. Then afterwards, my first like real solo track got signed on Revealed Recordings. And then I thought, like, why not like stick around in the EDM scene and then try to learn as much as possible. But for me as a musician, I wanted to make everything. So I'm 30 right now. If I'm 45, I'm still want to tell my kids that I'm still like a musician and that I work with other artists like, let's say like John Eubank works with Marco Bassato. So you have a singer-songwriter behind that. I want to look in the future and I want to make music for a longer period of time than just like the Kill the Buzz brand that I have right now. That's my main reason why I switched over to music. That doesn't mean for me that I'll be stopping making EDM music, because for the festivals you want to have the energetic tracks. And the best thing for me is to play my own energetic tracks, and at the same time have those tracks which are out there on the radio or which are out there, let's say on Spotify or whatever, to get the attention of a broader audience. Any other questions? Sir in back.
Hi.
Hi.
My question is, what's the most important thing you learned with Hardwell, from Hardwell?
Don't drink
Tips
too
of
much.
Producing.
As a producer, the best thing that I've learned from him is to learn how to listen, how to use your ears. Training your ears and whoa. And your eyes. Like training your ears is one of the most. Let me turn this off a little bit. Training your ears is the most important thing that you should do as a producer. First of all, you want to make sure that you hear exactly what you had in mind, and second of all, when you're trying to produce your track, you don't want to, like I told you before, you don't want to overproduce anything. You don't want to miss out any frequency balances in your tracks. Let's say you're boosting too much 20K, or you're boosting too much 15K, or you're boosting too much low ends. That will fuck up your track, basically. So your ears are the most important instruments that you have for yourself, and that's the best thing that you can train. That's the best tip that I got in the studio.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, you.
So now you got a good setup, I guess. Like
Yeah, kinda.
treatment, yeah. But you started simple, just like everyone else.
Yeah, you know what I started off with? I don't think I have a picture of it. I started off with, everybody has that stereo hi-fi set that you got as a kid, which had a tape recorder in it, a 3 CD switch player in it. I started with plugging that thing into my computer via the headphones, so that at least I had like, let's say, monitors. It was a Sony, I think it cost me like 50 euros, the whole set in total, and that's why I created my first tracks on. The thing is about, you want to hear the references in your ears, so it doesn't really matter on what kind of monitors you're making your tracks on. Some DJs even create a whole track on their headphones, but they use references of different tracks. So if I listen to an Afrojack track and I think, hey, my track should sound the same way, but it doesn't, then I'm gonna listen to it like, okay, I'm missing a little bit of highs, I'm missing a little bit of lows, and that's the way I use my ears to do the production. So you don't have to immediately buy the Dyne Audios or a Genelec, the 20-inch or whatever inch, and 6 subwoofers. It's not a guarantee that your track will sound solid. The first thing that you need to learn is how to use your ears and how to get the track the way you want it to sound and the way you use your references.
Okay, thank you. Another question, if I may.
Yeah.
About pitching, because I hear a lot of producers over here. Last year's about how you mix that kind of thing. It's important, but what for me is really hard is like the pitch part from samples, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I don't use Logic. I use FL Studio, but I did use Logic.
Yeah.
Do you have a separate plugin for
For
to
pitching?
make sure that everything is in the same key?
No, I don't use a plugin. You have in Logic. I know you have a tuner, which gives you the information on which key it is. But I don't pitch. I don't always pitch my snares. I don't always pitch my hi-hats, or I do pitch my kicks because they have a bass frequency, and you want to make sure that the bass frequency doesn't interfere with any other basses. But it doesn't really matter which plugin you use to pitch your snares or whatever, because if the snare already sounds good, if it's not like vague in the mix, in my opinion, you don't have to like always pitch everything into the right key. If you're using a tom which has like a tonal in it, so every sample that uses a certain tone, most of them are in the low ends, then it's important to pitch, because you cannot play, if you for example make a track in C major, which is very happy, you cannot have a tom in an E flat, because that's minor again, and that will interfere with each other. I don't have any like preferred plugins or whatever. I use elastic pitch, but then again, I don't pitch everything.
Okay, so does that mean as well that you don't use a lot of samples, like with toms, a full drum kit, I mean?
No, you know, I have a library with a lot of samples, so I usually try to figure out which sample fits. So I play the track, and then just by pressing the cursor down during the track, and I feel like I can show you what I mean. It's easier. So if this would be my track and I needed to find a tom, I would type it in here, and let's say tom. And if I'm using my sample bank and the track is playing, I'll just use this cursor to figure out which tom basically will fit the track. And if I hear something that matches, then I'll drag it in. And if in the end it doesn't really match to the thing that I'm trying to create, then I'll leave it out and search again in another different library.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Wow. You can be a quarterback.
All right, hey again. So we were wondering if you don't necessarily make your own sound, we were just wondering, like, where do you find your samples or sounds for, like, let's say Serum, for example?
I use a lot of Splice, for
Splice.
instance. Like Splice is for me, it's the best thing around. I have a lot of Serum sample packs as well. But the thing is, with not like creating your own sound, through your mix and through the sounds that you choose, you can hear if it's you or if it's someone else. I'm really fond of, like, this is the things from Cymatic, which you can get for free. These things that I bought, and during like the last 5 years, I'm gathering all the banks that I'm fond of to use. But if I'm not really like fond of using it anymore, I'll just delete it, because if I'm not using it, there's no use for me to have it in here. And the thing that I always do is when, let's say, I want to search for sounds, I just play it and click it until I hear the sound that I want, because I don't want to spend a lot of time in synthesis and like tweaking everything. The tweaking comes in the end with putting distortion in it, nodding the cutoff, maybe putting the sustain or the release in another position, until I get that sound that I wanted to have, and until I get the plugin to react the way I want it to react when I'm playing the chord or playing the melody.
Yeah, all right. You see, that's the thing as well. Like, what we like to do is, you know, we take the preset and we use the sample, and then exactly like you say, you just to find like the correct bass, and then when we do it, then after, like, we attempt to tweak it at the end. But then, you know, also when what was the question now? I forgot.
It's okay, don't worry. Because the thing is with making music, like, basically it's for me, it's about having fun. I have all these ideas in my head, and I just want to have fun in the studio. And if I don't get the right result, then I'll probably leave it alone for, let's say, a week, and then maybe I'll try to come back. Because for some tracks I have like 6 different versions of it. And then the 4th version is the best version, and then I will work that one really out until it becomes a track of itself. So for me, it was all about fun instead of being the nerd who tries to tweak every sound the way he wants him to be. I'm not like that good in synthesis, so for me it's easier to like skip through all the presets that they are, and if I find a sound that matches, then afterwards I'm trying to tweak it until it really sounds the way that I want it to.
Right, awesome.
And any other questions? Yes.
So that tweaking, are you doing that the same time as you do the production, or
No,
is it afterwards?
Afterwards. I first want to have the whole production there, and then afterwards I'm going to do the EQing, and then afterwards I'm going to put all the faders in balance. I like to have this little thing over here, the master, in as low as possible, because I wanted to hear dynamics. I can pump up the volume later with limiting and when the mastering will be done. But the first thing is I want to have the arrangement ready. I want to make sure that the whole composition of the track is the way that I want it to have it, so that every part of itself has its unique thing, and the track fluidly walks.
Right.
And then from that point on, I'm trying to find the right balance for every sound. So afterwards, I'm going to do the distortion, because I don't want to spend all my time tweaking one sound, and then 6 hours later, I think, nah, I'm not going to use it anymore, and then delete it, and the whole track is not there yet. So composing comes first, and then tweaking.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Any other questions?
It's gonna be my last one.
They are for free, so you already paid.
Yep. So we were wondering if you have any good tips on mix and mastering. maybe throughout your whole track or at the end?
Mixing and mastering. Mixing. For mixing, the best thing to do is to keep everything in balance. Don't overproduce it. Even for like, it's cool when you listen to your tracks and the bass line really comes out, and you're like, whoa, that's a really good low end. But in the end, if you're listening to a club, if you're playing the track in a club, there will probably be too much low end. So having the right balance and having the right punch in everything, I think that's more important than like getting everything loud. Like for instance, even in this track, as you can see, some faders are going really low, others aren't. Depends on what kind of sound it is and how hard the sample already is. But there's already a lot of bass coming out because the balance is there. If you overdo the bass, then you have to immediately pull up every other sound as well, up until that point that you cannot pull up anything anymore, and it sounds overproduced. That's
Appreciate
it.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
About balance, do you use widening plugins?
Yeah, I use widening plugins, but I also use panning. If I would use a widening plugin, let's see, if I can make it. Let's say for this hi-hat, now I've got it panned to the right because probably one of these other samples is panned to the left, so that you have this great balance between your hi-hats a little bit to the right and then a clap a little bit more to the left, so that it doesn't like, so that it isn't in the same space. Because if you push everything in the same space, there's no space for anything else left. But if I want to, let's say, if I didn't pan this, the thing that I love to do is, in Logic at least, I use a sample delay. This is how it sounds normally. And if I, let's say, put 120 in, it gives you a bigger spectrum of the sample itself, and that's what I use for like stereo widening. But I'm more fond of like panning stuff to the left and stuff to the right, so that you give it their own place in the mix.
But also, because I do that as well, but on synths and basses, I'm not sure if I should do it or not. Sometimes I do it, but then I find it hard to properly mix it because some things I don't know the balance. What balance is good, and if you use it at all.
Finding the right balance between in your track is, I think, one of the hardest things to do. But that's something you need to train. So I made those mistakes as well in the past. I was like stereo spreading everything because I thought that sounds cool. But in the end, like if you have a speaker, you want to have your kick in the center and your bass line in the center. The reason why is because the speaker gives the most pressure on that point. But you don't want to have everything else in there as well. But there's a tip that Laidback Luke gave once. He said, if you push your track in mono and the track is still there, that means your track essence, the essence of your track is like good. The balance of that part is good. Okay. And if you put it back in stereo, then all the other elements come back again. That makes it like a better mix for yourself, just to check up. Because if you put your track in mono, and let's say, for instance, your whole lead is gone and the whole melody line is gone, then you know there's something wrong with my mix and you have to redo it again. But like if you overproduce a lead, at some point it will be really difficult to get it back the way you wanted to do it. But that's just hard work, and that's just trying to do it over and over again until you make so much mistakes that at one point you realize, okay, this is not working, I need to find myself another method to do it. Because there's no really good or wrong in producing. There's not like a single plugin which will fix everything. It's just you practicing it a lot.
But on the synths, you use it as well, the widening plugins? Or
No. The synths, I use no widening plugins. what I do is, let's say, for instance, this one. This is how it sounds. So then I just always cut everything around 120 with EQ. Then I put a camera crusher on it. If I wanted to have a little bit more distortion, you can also put a bit crusher on it, and then the distortion of, let's say, your DAW itself. And then what I do for widening it a little bit is I put a reverb on it. Yeah. I'm really fond of the acoustic reverb, because in the end it sounds like this. And if I don't put it on, but the reverb already gives that sort of stereo effect while keeping the lead melody in the middle and keeping it strong and alive. The more reverb you use on a synth, the more you push it back. What you can also do besides that is use a send button or a send channel, which basically means that every time you can like balance it out how much reverb you can give it. If you put our compressor behind like the reverb, you can also sidechain it. As soon as the let's say the melody line is playing, you won't hear any reverb, and as soon as it stops, the compressor will stop, and then you will hear the reverb. It's a little trick that trance producers use when like creating those big melodies, and then you hear that reverb coming up. That's basically how they do it.
I don't see producers doing it now, like the bigger producers with the send buses. I mean,
I can show you for like in the vocal. Let's see. This is the vocal. As you can see, I use send channels, channel strips. As you can hear, as soon as the vocal stops, like here in the end, these two will pop on. If I don't do that, and if I just use no compression behind it, or use this, you can hear that it's like there's too much reverb, there's too much delay, and with putting the compressor behind the echo or the reverb, you can see that it get ducked away. With a vocal, it's very important to keep it alive and keep it in balance and not like over reverbing it. Although it sounds cool, and in some tracks they do use it, but that's more like of a gimmick of the track itself. But for what I personally love to do with vocals is to do it this way, so that you can hear the vocal, but you will still have like the effect. But that's the same idea that works on leads as well. It doesn't mean that you always do it that way, but that's a possibility to do it.
This is just efficiency that you put it in the bus?
Sorry?
Now you decided like, okay, I don't put it on the channel where the vocal is.
Yeah.
But you put it on the send bus. Is it pure for efficiency, or?
No, it's because, like I told you, like the more reverb you put on a vocal, let's say for this part, the more as you can hear, the reverb is everywhere right now. So if you want to put that in a right balance, there's no way, because it already fills up the whole spectrum of your mix with the reverb. So why I do this is to keep everything in balance and everything controllable. That's why I do it. And that's the same that you can do for your lead sounds as well.
But then you didn't, not to be annoying, but then you didn't explain why you put it in the send bus instead of just on the main mixer with the vocal on it. Because where you have the EQs as well.
No, because the main reason why I don't do it is because if you put a lot of reverb on your main vocal, putting reverb on anything means that you're pushing the sound a little bit backwards in the room.
Okay.
But you want to have that sound in front of the room instead of in the back. So that's why I don't do it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we are out of time. Give a big applause for Kildevis.
Thank you.